Hey everybody, sorry forgive me. I'm trying to find a decent song to have like an intro from like OC Remix. The stuff is it's fairly free. I'll give credit where credit is due. That first one was from Xenogears. This one's from and some of these are really like professionally done. So this one's from Xenogears. I mean, this one's from Final Fantasy VII. You can hear the cry of the planet when you go down. You're in like the ancient world, that kind of thing. Anyway, I think they're pretty good. So one thing I think I've been doing is the music tends to distract from like the message I'm trying to get out here. So I'm just gonna go solo with the mic. I mean, that's what a lot of podcast people do. So why not join in that? You don't need a background music to focus on. That's mainly for me. When I do my reading, I try to the thing about video game music, it's pretty amazing. It has to be motivational and not distracting at the same time. So it's perfect for me trying to, chain my coherent thought together. So the past couple of days, I haven't had a chance to meet with groups of people besides at work. At work, it's a different story. Luckily, our job is viewed as essential. We sell it's a warehouse. It's like a secondhand warehouse, right? And I'm a lead there, so I get to direct traffic, but our work has been a little bit low. We have not been able to, progressively expand our stores, right? We are now just filling up stores based on what they need because there's the social distancing and everything. By the way, if you guys are foreign viewers, I have heard stories about Americans getting pulled over and getting fined $200 for non-essential travel, besides like work and groceries and everything else like that. So I went to my warehouse's front store. I took my kids with me because they haven't been out of the house in ages, dude. So now I gotta, not ages, but it's been like 2 weeks. Besides our yard and walking them around, and people with masks are everywhere. And I don't know, I really think that the average person can survive the flu. If I was old, perhaps I would not buy into it. Speaking of specifically of the coronavirus and all that. But but that's my job as a parent, right? Speaking specifically of backlogs in games, something that really used to get to me back in the day. One of the reasons I use kind of like this this YouTube thing as an outreach for myself. It's not, you won't hear me preaching Christianity more often than not through videos. That's just not maybe in Spiral Nights because the game's just so automatic for me. Catacomb Kids, not yet, dude. I made it to floor 9 like twice, but that's in the backlog. I think it's a total of 4 times. You'll see that in the next couple of days if you follow that series. But it's neat having an outlet of creativity. So, but we got to be careful we don't just dwell on that the entire time, right? This entire idea of us getting paid to do nothing and the economy being shut down, that is the government's telling us to do this just because if the hospitals get overrun, which they are, and depending upon where you are, then bad things happen. It's basically like the entire country says we're sick. 70% of them can actually stay at home and recover from it. But the 30% that need the help, they don't get it or it's too late. And those are the horror stories you see on the media, unfortunately. So the difference between a God perspective, a transcendent perspective, and a materialistic perspective, specifically, is a lot of your outlook on life, right? So my channel's name is Good Spirit. I try to look toward the good, but then you have to define what is good. What is good? So what is good is purpose. How do you define what purpose or whose purpose? And that's a legitimate question when it comes to like atheism, because that always leads to fascism. One person, we give each other meaning so we can take it away. So therefore, there's no ultimate meaning. Everything becomes meaningless. Nietzsche wrestled with this so many times in his philosophy. But if you appeal to the transcendent, there is absolute reason. There's absolute morality. But if you do that, you also have to be held accountable. And a lot of people don't want to be held accountable, specifically because like sex itself is like the language of America at the moment. You don't want to have people define what you get into, what your hormonal urges pull you toward. You want to define that. You don't want somebody to tell you it's wrong. You want to say I was made like this. Well, then who made you? A random chance? Well, then you're giving yourself meaning and you can take it away again. So again, you run into the problem of meaninglessness. But we can't always dive into philosophy, right? We can, I guess. But you have to give your mind a chance to break free. So games like Final Fantasy VII, which is where that song you can hear the cry of the planet. I know they just remade that game. I wish I had a PS4. I would play the crap out of it. I wish I had a working copy of Breath of the Wild for Legend of Zelda. I don't have it anymore. Cracked it open to play it like a month ago. There's a crack running down it. Well, you can't really repair that. Like literally a crack in the CD, like, or it's from the center out, I guess. So that was an issue. Kind of bummed that the game eventually gives you like a map of your entire time traversing the whole territory in the past 100 hours. There's entire vast regions I've never even walked through, and it was just kind of neat to walk through that and experience the game and have the family. So have the family partake in that as well. I would fight the bad guys. My wife would do the puzzles. My 8-year-old would walk around the town with a horse, and my 3-year-old would hit buttons, and we just give her the controller, and she'd be just absolutely happy about that. She loved it. So giving into a mass panic, it's kind of where things are. Because, like, what are you holding on to? What gives life meaning and value? Because we are creatures of reason. There are creatures of instinct, which we are not, and there's creatures of reason. We can definitely listen. We can abolish our reason and throw our instincts up as top priority. This is how I'm made, therefore I have to follow it. That is determinism in a nutshell. So if you're going to follow that direction, then, if a pretty lady walks down the road, why should I stop myself? I mean, that if you take that logic to its natural conclusion, but then the obvious response, usually from secularism, is, what, would you want to live in a world like that? And that's immediately like, well, why wouldn't you want to live in a world like that? Once you can throw it right back, just flip it over and throw it back, it's a bad argument. You have to look for something else. So usually the common secular theme is human flourishing. What makes humanity flourish? What feels right? Because we think with our feelings these days. But you got to be careful of that, because your feelings can lie to you, especially if you are under the influence of passion hormones, drugs. It took me a while to have somebody admit, I had a conversation with them before, that truth was important. Do you feel truth is important, or isn't important? If you feel a certain way, does that make something not true? Well, no, it doesn't. We know this. Our reason should trump your emotion. All right. You'll see me kind of going, I'll preach roughly the same, right? I'll speak roughly the same message. Man, that sun looks so pretty. Every time I do one of these, there's a general theme of my life that I try to propagate. I'm into martial arts. I believe integrity is solid. I believe God put the way your body moves and reacts and builds into everything else that's about our life, right? If you put yourself into hard areas, if you find yourself being called toward a certain area that is difficult, that you can even push through and other people cannot, you should really look into that. That might be an area that you are called to succeed in. For other people, if you're not drawn toward it, you might be pushed toward it. You might go through certain amounts of suffering, which you cannot see the end of until you see somebody else who goes through that same amount of suffering. And then you can help guide them back. So, where am I going with all this? Absolutes versus relatives. If you want to have a better community, if you want to have the world flourish, transcendence has to be your goal. You have to look about, getting back to what I was talking about before, belief in God makes you constantly thankful for what you have. It is gifted to you. Something above and beyond yourself has put that toward you and lifted you up and given you, even if you're like a dude with one arm, dude, at least I'm alive with one arm. That's the kind of perspective you had. The opposite end of things is when you try to put yourself in the judgment seat instead of God. You say, I deserve to have more. I should have more. You focus more on what you don't have as opposed to what you do. That's your focal point. So at work, this is very prevalent for me. I'm immediately happy to have a job. Immediately. I'm glad I can work for money because I understand getting money without working for it is not reality. This cannot go on forever. It's just, so I'm happy to have a job I can work. Some people in the restaurant industry have nothing to do right now, which is a really big pain in the butt. But they're all appealing for government help, and the government has effectively shut down the economy. Now we could keep it running, right? Hospitals might get overrun. Sure, it's the flu. People will recover from it. I keep saying it's the flu. It's a little more harsh than the flu, and more people are susceptible to it, and it is contagious more so than the flu. All right. But the other half of the people that I work with are like, why are we still open right now? It's our health. What's more important, our health or our company's productivity? Well, that's not the argument. Naturally, health is important, but that's also looking at it in like a tiny little spectrum. How are you going to eat? How are you going to raise a family? That's the bigger spectrum. We need to keep the economy churning. And I know I've said this before, but like capitalism is amazing. Go look in the Capitalism versus Socialism background. By the way, I have more books. I have 2 books, 2 or 3. The one's kind of a general book on philosophy of politics, but more on sociology or socialism. Sorry, not sociology. Then on capitalism, because I want to know my enemy a little bit more. It's very tough for me to try to debunk something I have no understanding of. All right, it's very tough for me to take criticism from people who think all paths lead to God, to those who have not studied exclusivity and truth. Relative pantheism, philosophy, relativity, philosophy, you can never nail down anything. You can never commit to anything. You can never say this is how things are, because it's constantly evolving with the karmic system. All is God, God is all, devalues the person, and things are different between generations. It's very difficult to nail down exactly what you're talking about. And they'll say, like, we don't believe in truth, we believe in many paths. But then they'll come out with books, like, this is how you do it, as if it's a truth path that you have to follow. Their truth path, sure. And it might help you. But it's still giving guidance. If you're going to be completely honest with that philosophy, then you should never study history. You should never study anything. You should just go purely on what you experience in your life. Because you have to deny the grand perspective. Because you are just as valuable as a table. if all is God and God, it's like the Force, the pantheistic Star Wars universe, right? It's like the Force that people touch. All is God and God is all. It's this giant moving mass. This giant dream, this ejaculation of Tiamat. It's neat seeing squirrels just like 3 stories up off the ground jumping around there. They're getting blinded by the sun. But positing absolutes, even saying that all paths lead to God, that's not settling on a commitment. And this is where you run into the trouble of leadership itself. How do you, it's amazing how this stuff connects. Having a father in the home committed to his family, or a wife committed to her husband and the family. Father committed to his wife, In a culture where we can buy and sell everything is consumption, we don't have to commit. Abortion's a big thing about this, right? Abortion says you don't have to commit to the outworking of your choice, even though we all know kids happen after sex. You can just abort the child. Even though you know you're killing a human being, you just say it's a pile of cells. Well, what am I? What is my 3-year-old? Besides, what separates an adult person? Like, when exactly is the aging process? When is the cap when you can't kill someone and say they're just a pile of cells? It's weird. So that you have this sea of non-commitment. So how do you have leadership? How do you have direction if you can't commit? You have to at least stand beside an absolute. Right? I would say that absolute's God. That's just there. It's very tough if you're using the laws of logic and you view nature to come up with something relative. All right, we are a mixture of both. Don't get me wrong. We're a mixture of absolute and relative. I'm a human being. So is my wife. We look a little different. We are not absolutes. We are absolute beings, but the variation kind of changes. It's pretty neat. So in the martial arts world, there's a temptation to be pious and pretentious, right? Sensei in itself, it's difficult to translate, but it's supposed to mean he who shows the way. Me teaching a 6'6" tall guy to punch and kick like myself, who is probably over a full foot less than that, I can show him how, give him tips, but he won't be able to be just like me. We're a little bit different, but I can show him the way. Right? The martial arts paradigm is pretty neat when it comes to the instruction. We're trying to do online classes. It's not the same. You can't give individual attention. But the piousness and pretentiousness comes if you put yourself on trial, if you put yourself up there and you succeed, which is a good possibility if you study harder than the other guy, if you go to a tournament and win. If you have a vision where you just want to, build a giant school, have everybody lean on me, and I know the certain way to do this kind of stuff. You could see this in arrogance online with people that just want to say all these other people are fake, but I know the true path. I am positing my absolute. Well, sort of, because everything in this plane, besides like the laws of logic and the transcendent perspective, it's hard for us to declare an absolute that's not already revealed. Right? The laws of logic can do this. The law of non-contradiction. Something cannot be X and not X at the same time. It can be both and. It could be blue and green, but it can't be blue and not blue. All right. The laws of logic and math just basically dictate there have to be absolutes. Even in an abstract concept, the laws themselves exist. They have to come from somewhere. Why doesn't gravity go down? Why does it stay up? Yeah, something to think about. What I was getting at with this when I started, I'm gonna circle back around to it, is the value of games, not in excess, but in order to bolster your creativity. Once in a while, so I'm reading. We just had here's my journal for C.S. Lewis. So we just had a online Zoom lecture. My question to the lecturer, who have much more experience in this than myself, is, and they have degrees in apologetics, right? So that's giving defense, specifically an answer for the Christian faith. I'm interested in the actual, just like a martial artist. I'm not interested in the kata, the form. I'm interested in the actual fight. So I'm actually interested in the conversation itself. How do I talk to people and express to them? Because the idea of evangelism is not that I want to brainwash you. It's just that I've found something that is so ridiculously true and makes your life amazing. I want to share it with you. I don't gain anything if you get it. I don't lose anything if you don't. But it's mandated by Scripture, and everybody, it's just so good for you to believe that God loves you and that He wanted to talk to you through a mortal being which came and died, just like the rest of us, and we got married to that. I think it's vitally important that people will understand this. I can't see any other hope for humanity. Look at what's going on now. People are afraid of their lives. Why are they afraid? Because we'll get the flu. like what are they holding on to? What does it do to death? Absolutely nothing. Right, we've been through this, and unfortunately, it's probably going to be touched on a couple times here and there. It does nothing to death. Maybe they aren't ready to die. Sure. What do you do to get ready? Help me out with that. We're all 100% terminal. It's not like the thing about American culture is everybody likes to be happy and pretend death does not exist. But if you go out, like I did this yesterday, sometimes I'll just stand there, reflect upon all of us being created beings. God actually creating us. Why we don't just talk to Him right then and there? And just sitting there and ignoring that. Because if you are the giver of absolutes, if my opinion, and I'm trying to fight for that, and I'm trying to rock it out, and I'm trying to say my way is the right way, here, enjoy my way, come follow me, it's all about me. Well, I'm kind of shaky because we know what's in our hearts. We know that other people can prove us wrong. We know we've been proven wrong. We know we lie. We know others lie too. We know others have impure motives. Maybe they want to be in part of the in crowd. The community was our topic last week for the C.S. Lewis, last month for the C.S. Lewis Institute. So getting to become a member of the in crowd as opposed to a member of just the crowd. It's you want to be part of the club that knows. They know, at least they know the problem instead of the one that does the solution. Well, it turns out that you want to be proficient in whatever skill set you're going for, or club you're in. You actually focus on the task at hand instead of trying to like rub elbows with those who are like in the in crowd. You get in the in crowd legitimately by being recognized for either your ability or gifts, or I don't know, the blessings you have, right? But there's a time once in a while where, it is okay to retreat to the creative. Um, One of the most, everyone's given these certain moments in your life you can look back and say, that's what changed me. Mine is when I had my mom raising myself and my brother, and we had a Super Nintendo because games just kept us occupied. And she went to Blockbuster Video back when they still let you get videos. And she's like, the guy recommended this game. It takes a long time. It was Final Fantasy IV, or Final Fantasy II, I guess, in America. Let me see if I can find it. So I started a new game. It was kind of slow. I was like, okay. See if I can I just drag this over here? No, it doesn't work like that. All right. Hold on, I can find it. But it was amazing. We can save this, right, please? Save image as. We got this. Desktop. Download. It's there somewhere. So you start out in a little town, and you start out as the Dark Knight, and the Dark Knight's kind of depressed, and you're forced to like kill these mages, and you're just like, what are you doing, man? Where exactly did this go to? They're like, why would you do this? Why would you do this to us? This does not make any sense. Why would you take our crystal? And it does say desktop. And he's like, yeah, why? And he starts reflecting on this stuff. He's like, why is the king having me? It just disappeared. Okay. I see what it's like. Let's go to all files. There we go. Final Fantasy 7 or 2. There it is. It's beautiful. Super Nintendo. That's all I wanted to show you. But anyway, so you start out and you're like, you're taking the crystals for the king. Turns out later on, the king is, spoiler alert, kind of hypnotized. Now this is my era. This is like 16-bit hardcore back in the day. Probably would not appeal to the modern gamer. Right? It takes a bit to get through. But the music was amazing. It was the first time music in a game went hand in hand. You get to read some stories. There's drama. There's death. There's fighting bad guys. But I got to a point, I'm like, I'm all alone. I don't even, I'm like 11 or 12 years old at the time. I'm like, I don't like, kind of into books, but not really. And then I quit the game. I come back later, and I look, and someone else had put 40 hours into the game. And so I'm like, all right, I load up the game. I'm on the moon. I'm fighting dragons. I've got these mega holy spells. I have a ninja and a summoner in my party. I was doing like 100 damage. This guy's doing like 4,000 per pop every time he swings his sword. I'm like, oh, this is so amazing. And right there, that was like when the enchantment of progression and the outworking of a practiced life, of putting yourself through trials. Now, I'm looking at it way more in depth than I did when I was 11, don't get me wrong. But you look at what happens to a person and how, like, he was a Dark Knight, but now he's literally a paladin. He's like purple hair, and he's has like a gold cloak. It's really sweet looking. And he has the Excalibur sword. I'm like, where did King Arthur come from? Like, what the crap? You have a dragoon who like launches himself in the air. You don't see him for a minute, and suddenly just comes down just like 3 times damage, just bounces off the dragon. You have wall spells, you're just like reflecting magic off yourself. They can't touch you. You fight Zeramus. You guys take up this much of the. Let me see if I can get my finger right. You're like right here with your little 5 characters. He takes up the whole rest of the screen, and you're just like, this is so amazing. And of course, I lost because I had no idea what I was doing, but it was still really cool looking, dude. So I get to see where I was, and this is where you get the childhood fantasy dreams, where you were before, and you see the almost impossible task of attaining this kind of character. It's amazing. So I saw that, and I think I applied it to martial arts as I was growing older, because now I see where I am now. I'm training some so I'm not 100% going with the social distancing thing, but I'm training 2 guys at least, sometimes a third, at my place. It's really fun. They are not used to this kind of thing, but I can see the potential in them. And it's easy for me to synergize this kind of potential with the martial arts background. I see everybody as Christ sees them. I see every person as a black belt. That is their potential. I just have to guide them there. It might take a couple of years. That's how the martial arts works. We are focusing on hurting people, but we're doing it tactfully, and we're trying to mitigate damage for ourselves. And we put so much practice in on that one chance we might get into a fight. How close is that to actually having a not nice, natural, outworking worldview for yourself? So that way, when you have the conversation with somebody, or it just comes up, you have the chance to convince them, or at least show them your life is pretty good because of the outworkings of your worldview. We're told to be salt and light. Living, I can't just argue Christianity. I can, but if I'm living a life of debauchery and sin and cheating on my wife and neglecting my kids, well, what's that going to tell you about? Do you want part of that? I mean, probably not. Though the statistics are there that the divorce rate's high in America, that doesn't mean we know it's right. Parents should stay together for their kids, man. Otherwise, they grow up thinking, well, they didn't love me enough to rectify their issues. That is the reality of what we live in. So I'd recommend sticking with your mate. Marriage is devalued. It's sacred. It's your wife taking your word. It is me giving my word to her, bound by the state and by God. All right, we have like a 3-party system. We have us, we have the state, the governing body, and then we have the transcendent, all linking us together, assuming that our words have meaning and they should be honored. When you devalue marriage, a sacred thing that should be honored, you start devaluing words and meaning, or you start trying to give them your own value instead of taking the value for what it means and what we understand. So many times I have conversations with those that believe in relativity, even though they don't even know what they believe in, because people are just all over the spectrum now. So I have to kind of tell them what category they're going with their mind and their worldview. Sometimes it takes me so long just to have them admit the truth is important. And that's okay. Sometimes you really they never wrestled with this. If you never wrestle with it, when the time comes and you're thinking about it, you really won't know where to put your mind. It's good to have a philosophical outworking way before you can get there. So the point I was trying to make with this whole thing is meditation time, specifically now, since the country is slowing down, take it, man. I literally, when I wake up so early in the morning. I'm not going to tell you yet. Maybe I'll tell you later. And I just sat there in my chair, and I just thought about the day. And I wasn't praying to God lead me. I'm just, sitting there in meditation time. Thinking about the conversations that we had before. Thinking about, I'm like, one of the thoughts that came to my mind was like, I should take my kids out at least an hour a day and make sure they play and give them no tech time until that playtime is done. Boom. And they will have fun playing. Because I've done this before, but not in a structured method. Playing is necessary for kids. They got to get out there and they got to use their bodies. They got to use their hands. Shame on the parents that just put a video game in front of them because they want some time for their own video games. What are you teaching? That we are all about consumerism and pacifying the time? Delaying the inevitable? Then what happens when our life's about to be taken away from us? Where a threat of disease is coming toward us. What do? We have not thought out our natural worldview. We know we're going to die. We've heard it somewhere and we've seen it in movies. 3 million people die in a movie. John Wick kills them all, But we never really thought about our own death. We're John Wick. We don't die. It might hurt, but then the reality sets in. We've seen people die. We know the end comes. I personally believe that the when you look for a debate, you look for what it best explains reality. You don't look for poking holes purposely in another person's worldview, but you do question how that it can explain reality if there are contradictions in other places. And that's what I like to open up for discussion, because I like to examine my own more so than theirs. So if they come up with a question I have no answer for, it's time for me to hit the books. Right? I didn't know much about socialism because everybody was about Bernie Sanders. Now everyone's about Corona. And holy crap, Joe Biden, unfortunately, his coherent thought it's waning a lot. But I do like our president, where he's going with his worldview. He kind of had an outworking of it. But there is a time. You can't spend your entire life just working on your worldview. Once you have that set, you can work on your skill set. You can work on explaining it, communication. But we have I'm reading this book called the Dad's Christian Answer book. There's two swords we as males have. There's the silver sword, which is our sword of our skill sets. Conversation can be part of a skill set. And then our sword of affirmation. I don't use my skill set in my home. I give affirmation. I instruct. I lead. I'm a parent and a husband. At work, I'm a worker. Or I'm a leader. Depends what your function is. But that's your skill set. Here is your affirmation, your social building. And you need to take time to do both. You can't just have your hand in one sword or the other. If you only have social building, well, if I treat everybody at work like I treat my family, no one's going to listen to me. I'll be everyone's friend. Think about leadership, especially in work, where your skill set is you have to be proficient at it and you have to hold people accountable. If I treat everybody here like I do at work, well, I'm not going to fire my family, right? It just kind of doesn't work. But it is something to think about. And diving into the fantasy and the creativity that God has given us is pretty awesome. I'm a fan. I'm a fan of a lot of things, so just want to leave you with that. Those are my Sunday thoughts. I'm going to do at least one of these every Sunday. I got a decent backlog. I got some Catacomb Kids, some Let's Plays coming up here. But seeking truth is definitely more of my passion than anything else. I love truth, and I love discussion, and I hope you guys do too. Please, if you could, click the like button. Subscribe if you want to see more in the future. Please sub. It does help me out. If this could be a part-time thing, I would gladly do it all the time. Right now, Corona is just helping me put out more videos and get a better log so that way I can keep up with my studies. Because as much as I love putting out videos here, it is an outreach for me. I watch my language. I try to have good integrity. I try to develop my skill set. It's honestly about who I can talk to and share Christ with, because it's all about him, not me. When I start pushing my own life as being more important, be like me, I'm going to start looking down my nose, because no one's going to be like me. I'll have to look down my nose at everybody. No one's as good as me. You'll get that kind of pretentiousness. Even if they are as good as you, you'll still be bitter. You'll try to poke holes in them instead of trying to, explain which life should be better. The transcendent that was gifted to us in human form, or just what I think should be. Anyway. There we go. Anyway, I'll see you next time. Take care.